есть город, который я вижу во сне. О, если бы знали, как дорог у Черного моря открывшийся мне в цветущих акациях город, в цветущих акациях город у Черного моря.
Shifted again, but I won't. I'll just speak a few minutes. What I wanted to say was appropriate for when there were more Ukrainian people here. And what I wanted to say is, to talk about was how important communism and communist idealism was for people who'd never been there. You know, you might wonder why Odessa, because I've been asked this question so many times. What's the big deal about 1917? I have to say that this conference was extremely hard to organize for many reasons, including what's the big deal about 1917? What's Odessa anyway? You know, why Odessa? Why not Kiev and the rest of it? For those of you who are from Ukraine, I just want to say that communism represented an enormous and wonderful dream. I'll just talk about my own family. In my mother's family, they're French. They come from on that particular side, they come from Poland. They were extremely poor. Before the war, World War II, and after the war, they were hardcore communists. Everybody, my mother and her family were all members of the Communist Party, and afterwards it was the same. One of my uncles, apparently, after the war, they were extremely poor, really had zero money because most of the family finished in Auschwitz or were killed either in Poland or parts of Ukraine, murdered really. They were extremely poor, but I had one uncle who apparently used, each time it was Stalin's birthday, even though they had no electricity at home and only cold water in provincial France, he would fill the trains with presents for Stalin. Nobody had been to Soviet Union, of course, but communism represented an extremely positive, wonderful dream. Now, people of my generation, which really is anybody born between, say, 1945 and 1965, for us too, you know, like all that hippie generation, you too, but yes, well, all right, Margaret as well, born between 1945 and 65, so we must be contemporaries. You know, for our hippie generation, wearing Che Guevara T-shirts and demonstrating in front of the American embassy, pro-Vietnam, pro some imaginary Soviet Union. By then it was Maoism because we were against the Soviet Union. This was a huge and fantastic dream. Nobody had been here. And in France especially, all the intellectuals were terribly pro-Soviet. You have to understand that this is the, you know, some people are brought up with fairy tales, you know, Hansel and Gretel, Goldilocks, but we were brought up with Marx and Lenin, you know, as wonderful people, and equal rights for women. It was just fantastic. So, you know, I mean, you have to understand that half of the West, Western Europe, really believed in that. And it was terribly important. So maybe it's part of that dream which I brought with me. Since then, I've been to many ex-communist countries, and at one point I did go to the Soviet Union, when it still existed, a place called Leningrad, maybe you've heard about it, in Moscow. I've never been to St. Petersburg, but I certainly have been to Leningrad. But anyway, what I want to say, we had this with us, and this is what we brought, what I brought personally here, the shreds of that dream. Anyway, so but this is why I think the centenary between 1917, which I think by now some of you have heard about, and 2017 has seen a number of extraordinary revolutions for women, and then the failure of the promises made to women, which has become absolutely patent in today. But the dreams are there, and the capacity to fight on is there. I just wanted to say, Women in War is an academic NGO, absolutely penniless, but we're part of some other thing called FEMAID, which I started a very long time ago, at the time of Bosnian and then Afghanistan war. The American intervention, the recent one. And the idea is that we keep on this conversation between activists and researchers and artists and people of young generation, because women's rights are not something that are acquired. I think we're living a period of phenomenal regression, and we're all threatened. And, you know, when women's rights are threatened, of course, men's rights are threatened, and gender rights generally. You know, I mean, feminism is a question about men. I gave a class here at the university here, and I never believed in my whole life I'd be talking about Engels and his essay in the family, telling students to look it up on nobody was taking notes, of course, but I said, go to Wikipedia, look up Engels, Friedrich Engels, you know, Marx, Engels, right. Anyway, so I hope they've read the essay. But, you know, what he says about the family is terribly important. So anyway, what I wanted to say, for those of you, please, apart from joining Women in War, which is, you could look at the website and Facebook, next year, hopefully, we're going to be in Nablus, because every year we try to be in either war zones or difficult zones. We started in 2014, huh? What? Where Nablus is? Just because. Oh yes, you didn't know. That's true. So maybe somebody else. Nablus, occupied Palestine and Israel. Okay. So if we can get away with this, but we have lots of other projects. I'd like to do something on Balkans, women in the Balkans and the Caucasus, because there's so much to share, and that would be a huge subject. And women in the military, you know, bringing together, and military and paramilitary and combatants, bringing together, say, Ukrainian military with Israeli, with, you know, all the talk we had about the South American female revolutionary groups. All these have to be talked about. So we'll see where all these happens. These are ongoing projects. Please join us. I mean, the revolution is ours, and it's ongoing. And it depends on us, and especially you lot, the younger generation. Thank you very much.